Hi, I'm Raf Anzovin, and here's a look at the Contour Rig Tools example rig. I built this rig to showcase Contour's tools and how they can be used with Maya's own rigging and deformation tools. It is a completely functional rig you can animate with, but it doesn't include every single control rigging feature you might want out of a rig. Instead, I've tried to make this rig as simple and easy to understand and learn from as possible. I have added a few additional control rigging flourishes, like a simple reverse foot and some space switchers. But for the most part, what you're seeing here is what naturally comes out of Contour Rig Tools features, without much embellishment. That includes things like spline-based, volume-preserving deformation, simple muscle systems, and stretchy IK. The shapes that display contour bones and joints can cause a performance hit, so we have the ability to remove them as needed. To see the bones and joints, we can restore the shapes from the contour menu. We'll also hide the bone radius indicators to make the bones easier to see. The first important thing to note is that Contour treats each bone chain as its own spline. Joints, and what we call bone CVs, are just control points on that spline, so you can get as many secondary controls as you want just by adding more bone CVs. Unlike most rigs that separate controls and joints, in this case the FK controls and joints are the same thing. If we switch this arm to FK mode, you can see the controls are simply the joints with an additional curve shape added to make them easy to select. This makes the hierarchy of a Contour Rig Tools rig very easy to understand, but still allows more complex control rigs if desired. Now let's take a look at how weight painting works for contour bone chains. As you can see, the majority of the arm is painted 100% to a single influence, the arm spline. The same is true for the spine, which is also mostly one influence, although it does include some influence from the leg and muscle splines. More on those in a moment. The deformation within the spine and at the elbow doesn't come from weight painting. It comes right from Contour's spline deformation. The leg is another good example. In general, you get much better deformation by relying on Contour's spline deformation as much as possible, rather than blending multiple weights in areas of high deformation as you normally would. Note that, even in the hip area where some spine weights are present, the area of greatest deformation is still painted primarily to the leg spline. Contour Rig Tools handles twist around the spline automatically, with no additional rigging or extra influences needed. To control how the shoulder propagates twist, for instance, I'm using Contour's Inherit Twist option. You can easily see the difference if I turn it off. This option stabilizes the twist at a joint, which is perfect for shoulders and hips. For the character's torso, I've constructed a simple pseudo-muscle system. It's made entirely out of contour bone chains constrained to each other with Contour's deform field constraints. These constraints deform, so to speak, the position and rotation of any transform in the same way that it would deform a mesh. Constraining bone chains to each other is a foundational technique for rigging with Contour. You can also constrain a transform directly to any point along the spline. Here, I'm using two locators attached to the spline near the elbow joint to drive a Maya pose interpolator. Contour does excellent deformation right out of the box, but it's sometimes useful to layer a PSD on top for very precise art-directed shapes. Using locators driven by the spline to drive the pose interpolator instead of joint rotation means that it will respond properly to any change in the spline, not just the rotation of a specific transform. Here you can see the pose weight values changing as I use a bone CV to change the spline's shape. For performance reasons, blend shapes and other deformers used with contour deformation need to be put after the contour deformer in the deformation chain. In this case, I'm using transform space blend shapes, with one of the locators that were constrained to the spline used as the transform space. I also often use delta mush on top of contour deformation. Contour's deformer doesn't need any assistance to produce good results when bending a mesh along a spline, but delta mush can be very useful in the areas that blend between contour spline influences. Finally, let's take a look at how Contour Rig Tools handles IK. Every contour joint or bone has attributes that allow you to override rotation or stretch, and the IK handle takes advantage of this. When the handle blends to IK, it's blending to those override inputs. This isn't limited to IK. You can drive them with anything you want in your own rigs. The Contour Rig Tools IK handle also has many built-in features that you'd normally have to rig yourself. This includes auto stretch and a smooth stretch option that removes IK pop. We've included links to the example rig and a demo version of Contour Rig Tools below, so you can take a look for yourself. This example rig only scratches the surface of what's possible with Contour Rig Tools. For more information, check out notionalpipe.com.